Hello, I am back with another video. Today we have two more juicy Reddit stories. I hope you enjoy. Here is the title to the first story. My fiancé cheated, so I ruined his life. So, where do I even begin? I guess I should start by saying that I never thought I'd be that girl, the one who'd be put in a situation like this. But here we are, and I'm about to share the most messed up story of my life. If you're here looking for some petty revenge drama, you're going to get more than you bargained for. Buckle up. I, 29F, met Jake, 30M, when I was 25. I wasn't expecting anything serious at first. I'd just gotten out of a long-term relationship, and I wasn't sure I was ready to jump into anything new. But Jake was persistent, charming, and funny. We went on a few dates, and things quickly escalated from casual to serious. He was everything I wanted, so I thought. He made me laugh, and he seemed so thoughtful. We moved in together after a year, and after 2 years of dating, we got engaged. When he proposed, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. He'd taken me to the place we first met and recreated our first date. He even gave me the same flowers I had on that night. It was perfect. And for the first time in my life, I believed I'd found my soulmate. Little did I know, I was about to get a very rude awakening. Everything started to unravel when I found a random text on his phone one night. He'd left his phone unlocked, and I know I shouldn't have snooped, but something told me to take a peek. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize, but it didn't take long to figure out who it was. I miss you, Jake. I wish we could spend more time together like we used to. Do you still think about me? My heart dropped into my stomach. At first, I thought it might be a joke or some weird miscommunication, but my gut told me otherwise. I confronted him the next day, and he brushed it off. It's nothing. Just some old friend. You know how people are. Yeah, well, I didn't buy it. I kept my cool, pretending like I wasn't bothered, but inside I was enraged. The thing is, I wanted to trust him. He'd never given me any reason to believe he'd cheat. But that text, it lingered inside of my stomach like a wildfire. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more signs. He was staying late at work, getting random calls that he'd immediately hang up when I walked into the room. His behavior became distant, and he stopped being as affectionate. It was like I was invisible. But the real bombshell came when I decided to take a wild leap and dig deeper. One night, I took his phone again when he was in the shower, and this time I found something more than just texts. There were photos, explicit photos, and they weren't of me. They were of some woman I'd never seen before. I was gutted, but also, oddly enough, kind of numb. I'd suspected it, but now it was staring me right in the face. I confronted him, and this time, he didn't deny it. It's not what you think, he said, but it didn't matter. He admitted to having an affair with her for the past 6 months. He'd been cheating on me with some woman from his work, and he'd even gone on weekend trips with her. I was completely shattered. How could he do this to me? I had given him everything, my trust, my love, and my future. But here's where things took a twist. Instead of breaking down in tears or storming out in anger like I would have expected, something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to be the woman who gets cheated on and just accepts it. I wanted him to feel the full weight of his betrayal. That night, I made one phone call. The perfect phone call. You see, my best friend, Sarah, works as a private investigator. She doesn't usually deal with cheating spouses, but she owed me a favor from when I helped her cover up a small complication in her personal life. Anyway, she was more than happy to help. I asked her to track down everything she could about the woman Jake was seeing. Her name was Tiffany, and she worked at some marketing firm. I told Sarah to dig deep, get her social media, find out where she lived, and most importantly, get her some dirty laundry. Sarah did her thing, and within 48 hours, I had a file on Tiffany. Turns out, Tiffany wasn't just some random coworker. She was married to a guy named Mark, who had no idea she was sleeping with my fiancé. I couldn't believe it. Not only had Jake been betraying me, but this woman had a whole family. So, what did I do with this information? I called Mark. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is some revenge fantasy crap. But hear me out, this is where things really get interesting. I didn't just tell Mark about the affair. No, I had a better plan. I invited him over for coffee. I showed him the photos, the texts, and the evidence. I even showed him a video I'd gotten from Sarah of Tiffany meeting Jake at a hotel. I didn't ask how Sarah got that. Mark was absolutely stunned. And he was angry, not just at Tiffany, but at me for sitting on this information for so long. But here's the kicker. I told Mark that I didn't want to ruin his marriage. I said, "I'm not here to destroy your life. I just want you to know what's been happening. You can choose what to do with it." He left that meeting in a daze, and I honestly didn't think much more of it. I assumed he'd just confront Tiffany, and maybe we'd both move on with our lives. But oh no. The next day, things took a wild turn. I got a call from Jake while I was out running errands. He sounded frantic. "What did you do?" he shouted. "What did you tell Mark?" I was genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" Turns out, Mark had called Tiffany and told her everything. Tiffany had tried to brush it off, but Mark wasn't having it. He was done. He had already packed his things and was moving out of their shared home. And that wasn't the worst part. Tiffany had been married to Mark for 8 years. They had 2 kids. And Mark? He was loaded. He had some high-paying technical job, and Tiffany had been living the high life on his dime. When Mark found out about the affair, he didn't just get angry, he got strategic. He filed for divorce that afternoon and made sure to drag her through the mud. Jake was devastated when he realized that not only had he lost me, but Tiffany was going to lose everything. All the material things she had taken for granted were about to vanish, and her reputation at work would never be the same. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse for him, Jake got a call from his boss. Apparently, the affair with Tiffany had somehow gotten out to the office, because, people talk, and Jake's reputation at work took a major hit. He was accused of sexual harassment by other employees who had heard about his behavior. His company was doing a full investigation. The fallout was swift, and within a month, he lost his job. At this point, I could barely contain my delight. It wasn't just that he was losing everything, his job, his woman, his reputation, but I knew the damage was irreparable. He was finished. I didn't even get the satisfaction of ending things myself. He came crawling back, apologizing, begging for me to forgive him. But I'd already moved on. I had no sympathy left. So here I am, telling you all this because I'm finally at peace. Jake learned the hard way that cheating doesn't just hurt the person you betray, it hurts everyone around you. And sometimes, when you think you've ruined someone's life, the universe has a funny way of showing you just how deep the consequences go. In the end, I walked away with my head held high, knowing that I didn't have to lift a finger to ruin his life. I just had to let the truth work its magic. TLDR, my fiancé cheated on me with a woman who was also married. I found out, contacted her husband, and ended up ruining both of their lives. Jake lost me, his job, and his reputation, while Tiffany lost her marriage and her luxury lifestyle. That is the end of the first story. I feel bad for Opie. However, how can you cheat on your man when he makes so much money and gives you that high life you always wanted? I bet Mark works so hard for Tiffany and makes a lot of money for his effort. Can you imagine even thinking about cheating on your husband when he makes 6 figures? I couldn't. Anyway, here is the second story. I hope you enjoy it as much as you enjoyed this one. This is the title. My husband's affair partner sent me a wedding invitation. Throwaway because I don't want this getting back to anyone I know. I'm Laura, and my life was turned upside down not too long ago. I was married to Jared for 7 years. We have 2 beautiful kids, Toby, who's 5, and Emma, who's 8. Our family life was, by all appearances, what I thought was perfect. We had the house, the vacations, the 2-car garage, the dog, and the friends who thought we were the ideal couple. But one thing that no one knew, no one except me, I guess, is that I had started to notice cracks in our relationship months before everything came crashing down. Jared and I met in college. He was the guy who everyone gravitated toward. He was funny, charming, and always the life of the party. I was a shy girl, a bit reserved, and didn't have the confidence I have now. But we balanced each other out perfectly. We clicked right away, and I knew I wanted to spend my life with him. After graduation, it didn't take long before we got engaged, and then married. We made a lot of plans, some of them came true, some didn't. We were happy though, and I genuinely believed we had a solid foundation. In the beginning, he was attentive, loving, and always there for me. But I started noticing little things over time. Nothing huge at first, just small changes that added up. Jared, who used to be glued to his phone whenever we were apart, had suddenly become very secretive with it. He would leave it face down, silent, and often take it with him to the bathroom or outside, like he didn't want me to even catch a glimpse of it. At first, I thought it was just work stuff. He'd been promoted to a managerial position at his company a few months before, so I brushed off my suspicions, chalking it up to stress. But the changes in his behavior were impossible to ignore. He started coming home late more often. Not a lot, just enough for me to notice. He'd give excuses like, a last-minute meeting or I got caught in traffic. Sometimes, I would hear him talking to someone on the phone, but it was always when I wasn't nearby. When I asked him about it, he would brush it off and say I was being paranoid. But I wasn't paranoid. I was just becoming more aware of the distance between us. He was pulling away, and I couldn't understand why. A week before it all came crashing down, I found something I wasn't supposed to find. I was doing some cleaning around the house, organizing the desk where we kept important documents, when I came across a bill for a hotel stay. It wasn't a typical business trip expense. It was in a city a few hours away from where we lived. The date on the bill was for a weekend I distinctly remembered Jared being out of town for work. I stared at it for a long time, trying to think of a reasonable explanation. But nothing came to mind. This was the first real sign that something was wrong, but even then, I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. The next day, the unthinkable happened. I checked the mail as I usually did in the afternoon. It was mostly junk, but there was one thick envelope with fancy lettering on it. I flipped it over and saw that it was addressed to me. It wasn't an ordinary invitation. The design was elaborate, flowers everywhere, gold foil, the whole works. At first, I assumed it was a wedding invite, but from who? We hadn't been invited to any weddings recently. I opened the envelope, still half distracted, but when I pulled the card out, my stomach sank. It was a wedding invitation. For a wedding between Jared and a woman named Emily. I froze. The card had our names on it, mine and Jared's, as though we were guests at their wedding. But Jared and Emily's pictures were right there. And it was addressed to me, like they were expecting me to show up. I thought my heart would stop. It didn't make sense. I didn't know Emily. I had never heard of her. But there it was, staring me in the face. My husband, the man I'd spent the last 7 years with, was marrying someone else. Someone who was not me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It was like everything went into slow motion. I just stared at the invitation, over and over again, trying to process what I was seeing. I tried calling Jared immediately, but he didn't answer. I left him a voicemail, my voice shaking, demanding to know what was going on. Hours passed. Nothing. He didn't respond to my messages. It was like he had vanished. When Jared finally came home, I didn't even greet him. I didn't say hi or how was your day. I didn't even ask how the kids were. I just held up the invitation. He went pale when he saw it, and the color drained from his face. He didn't say a word at first. He just stood there, looking at it, like he couldn't believe I had found out. I didn't give him a chance to explain. I snapped, my voice rising with anger and hurt. Jared, what is this? I demanded. Who is Emily? His face crumpled. Laura, I didn't want to hurt you like this, he said quietly, his voice shaking. Emily is someone I've been seeing for the last year. A full year, and I had never suspected a thing. The tears came then, like a flood I couldn't control. For the first time in 7 years, I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me. He tried to explain, but his words were hollow. He told me he was in love with Emily. He said he didn't know how to tell me, that he didn't want to hurt me. He said he'd been planning to leave, but he never found the courage. He said he was sorry. Those were the words he used, but all I could hear was the fact that he had been lying to me for a year. All those times he'd promised me he loved me. All those late nights at work, when he was really with her. All the little lies that piled up until they became this massive betrayal. I couldn't stay in the same room with him. I just told him to leave. He left willingly and I cried all night. The days after Jared left were a blur. I was an emotional wreck. I cried in the shower when the kids weren't around. I had to pretend everything was okay when all I wanted was to scream. Then, a week later, I got a message from Emily. She reached out to me on Facebook. I didn't know how to react, but I opened the message. She apologized for everything, said she never wanted to hurt me and that she didn't know how it all got out of hand. I was stunned. She said that Jared had promised her he was going to leave me, and that they were going to be together once the divorce was finalized. She was kind of sad about it. She said she never thought things would happen this way. I didn't feel sorry for her, though. She knew what she was doing. She knew Jared was married. She knew I had a family. So while I appreciated the apology, it didn't change anything. She was still complicit in this mess. I told her that, and she never responded. A few weeks after the message from Emily, Jared came back into my life again. He sent me a text begging to meet, saying he was confused and didn't know what he wanted. He said he missed us. He said he made a mistake and wanted to fix things. I was shocked. How could he think I would just take him back after everything? After the betrayal? After this? But the truth was, a part of me still wanted to believe him. I loved him. But then, I remembered the hotel bill, the secretive phone calls, the way he had lied to me, day after day. I told him it was over. There was nothing left to fix. The hardest part was that I didn't have closure. He didn't give me that. He didn't even try to make amends. He just expected me to forgive him and move on. But I couldn't. A few months later, I saw the news on social media. Emily and Jared got married. It was surreal. I had never imagined this day would come, but there it was, a photo of them, smiling, happy, holding hands and kissing as a couple. I can't say it didn't hurt, because it did. But at the same time, it felt like a weight had been lifted off me. Jared and Emily were no longer my problem. They had each other now, and I had to focus on my own life. It's been almost a year since everything fell apart, and while I'm still processing it, I've come a long way. I've spent time focusing on myself, rebuilding my confidence, and healing from the heartbreak. The kids are adjusting, and I'm learning to be the strong, independent woman I didn't even know I could be. I've started dating again. Slowly. I'm scared. But I'm learning to trust myself more than I ever did before. Jared might have destroyed the life we built together, but I'm finding a new one. And for once, I'm doing it for me. That is the end of the second story. How do you even send the wedding invitation to the wife of the man you want to marry? That is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. I hope you enjoyed the stories for today. I know I did. If you want to watch more of my videos, I have a playlist. It is the first link in the description. Have a wonderful day.